Betting on big government. Can you really go wrong? Well, my next guest says it actually might be the only safe bet for investors this election cycle. He is Matt Weinschenk, the senior analyst on Retirement Millionaire, and he joins us now. Thanks for coming in, Matt. Good to have you.
Good to be here.
So, Matt, you and I both live in the Washington, D.C. area, and anecdotally, I just want to kind of see from your vantage point what you've seen over the last 10 or 15 years in terms of growth. What is that growth, the additional houses, the more cars on the highways? What does all of that tell you about the growth in government spending?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's probably part of why we came to this thesis. I was here in 2008 and 2009 when, I was looking at the numbers and there was a recession everywhere, but I just didn't see it. I'm in Maryland. I think you're in Virginia. You just didn't see it around here, and you saw housing prices everywhere collapse, and they came down a little bit here, but they came right back up. It certainly wasn't like Las Vegas or Florida or anything. And just housing's crazy, building's crazy. It's just a vibrant area, and it's because of those government jobs. And it's not the rich, it's not New York, or it doesn't have these Wall Street jobs, but I think 4 of the 10 richest counties are all circling DC and Maryland and Virginia. And it's because of those government jobs, and it's because even if, they're not the highest paying, Silicon Valley jobs, they still provide like a nice middle class that really gets that median income up. So just being here, seeing the government boom over the last 20 years, it made us think, this is a great place to, people are looking for growth. They don't think of these boring government contractors, but it's actually a great place to get some safety, some easy growth, and some stability in your portfolio.
So, Matt, we've actually seen the economy explode just this year alone in terms of how much government growth is contributing to economic growth. 34% before the pandemic, now up to 55% during the pandemic. Where do you think government growth will be when the virus subsides?
We're not in the business of forecasting, but if it was 34%, it's going to go up to 36, 38, over the next few years. But it's really a long-term idea, and it's really because there are mechanisms in place that really suggest government spending goes up and up and up across economic cycles and across political cycles. Typically it's the Democrats that are expected to raise spending, but I think spending was up 53% under Bush, 22% under Reagan, and the Trump brand of republicanism it doesn't really consider austerity part of its platform.
You mentioned defense and war spending, and that's obviously part of the thesis, right? Is that defense contractors in particular benefit from this. But what other kinds of industries benefit from all this government spending, especially do we see more government spending in pharma because of the pandemic, or in technology because of work from home?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen there's companies sort of across the board, and they have varying levels of capturing government as part of their revenue. So pharma is getting all these big orders for vaccines. One of our companies in what we're calling our big government portfolio builds the records keeping systems, and we think for hospitals, and we think that sort of the failure to track data during this pandemic, and also the trouble hospitals have with getting overloaded, those things are going to lead to some hospital reforms, and that's going to benefit that company. One of them is Microsoft. They're going to build a $10 billion war cloud for the DoD, and think of how many government workers have Word and Excel licenses and all the Microsoft Exchange servers that are run by government agencies. So, that's such a big company. It's not necessarily the biggest part of their revenue, but that's the kind of things that we're looking for, and those are steady revenue streams. They're long-term contracts, and they allow these companies to invest in bigger projects. So that's what we're looking for, basically across the board.
Yeah, and I just bring up technology again because I think of where I live in Virginia. All west of me is the huge digital corridor that has just exploded. I mean, housing prices are off the charts. They haven't fallen. They're just going up. There are neighborhoods upon neighborhoods all along the tech corridor. You have every major auto company there. You have every major tech company. And they also have offices in DC for lobbying, but these are their technology offices, right? Facebook, Google, they're all out in the technology corridor. So I do think there is a correlation between some of the other technology or maybe sort of more recent technology investments, whether it's Netflix or the FANG stocks, that also kind of correlate to this. And I don't know if that's also what you're seeing.
All these large tech companies would love to be tech companies and stay in Silicon Valley, but they found this Washington game is so important to what they do. And you see the lobbying from these companies getting bigger. You see when they build data centers, they're all, they start in California. The next one's always Virginia. If you work with any Amazon cloud. And then there's other companies, Palantir is about to IPO, and they were a tech company that focused almost solely on providing analysis to government aid, data analysis to government agencies. And it's a really strange game having this private company work with these public databases and charging them money. And then it's a very interesting story. You should look into it. But there are so many businesses, especially smaller tech businesses, that realize when they get started, if they go and get those government contracts, it's a fantastic way to start a business because it's a huge buyer. And as we talk about government spending, the number of federal employees is almost flat since the 70s. That's because so much of it is outsourced, both to state and local employees, but also to these contractors. And you see it in, Booz Hamilton, the consultant agencies, they focus almost exclusively on government, and they find people with skills that don't want to work for a stodgy government agency, and they charge them a lot more than they would if they were internal. So just a big cash cow for the right kind of companies.
How do you sort of talk to that investor who says, well, I would never take out so much debt to repay my household bills? How can I justify investing in a strategy whose sole means of growth is that government is going to keep spending? Aren't I contributing to the problem?
Well, I mean, if that's how you feel, I wouldn't tell anybody to invest into anything that it wouldn't like. But, one of the companies in this builds the new aircraft carrier. The country decided it needs those because of rising tensions with Russia and China, and we've moved from sort of small scale insurgent warfare to these big tensions. So now we feel we need these big aircraft carriers. Now, if the company that builds those aircraft carriers went away, we would either not have them or we would have to build them ourselves. And it's going to cost the government a lot more to build them than this shipbuilding company that's been doing it for 130 years. So, the government is buying things because we think we need them. You could say we don't, but most of these things are things that are, things that we need. So if the companies go away, it would be worse. And some of the companies in here are providing protective equipment to firefighters to fight California wildfires, and they're rebuilding the 911 systems and computerizing them to help first responders. So, if you really don't like government spending, there's a lot of other, Social Security and those big ticket items that are different from the companies that are giving us products and services that, in many cases, we unquestionably need. So I wouldn't feel bad about it if I was a deficit hawk, but we are also not ideologues. We are talking about what is going to happen, what we think is going to happen, not what should. So that's up to you.
All right, Matt Weinschenk with a little bit of a moral conscious check there at the end, but thank you so much for those investment ideas. We know one thing is for sure, no matter who wins the presidential election, we are going to have one big dollar sign on the government spending side going forward. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jessica.
You can also find us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thanks for watching. I'm Jessica Stone.